As above, so below.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernard Beitman, MD. I am a psychiatrist and I study coincidences, among other things. And some of you know that I have this relationship with trees, and I'm delighted to have a plant speaker with us today, or plant whisperer. And I will introduce her after I tell you my story. And keep in mind, we invite you to come to the Coincidence Cafe. Takes place every third Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And we talk about coincidence stories in small groups. We tell each other the stories, among other things. So you can find the link at thecoincidenceproject.net, all one word, thecoincidenceproject.net, under participation. And take a look at my book too, because it's one of the backgrounds of the whole coincidence project. Well, on a recent Zoom call, where I was running it through talking about synchronicity, one of the participants described going to a large store with very few customers at the time she was in there. She encountered two men with injured left legs, one, two, and a third one with a prosthetic left leg. And that was about all the people she ran into. She wondered what this serial coincidence might mean to her, and she kind of thought it might have something to do with her own leg, but she didn't know. A few days later on a hike, her left knee began to throb. Osteoarthritis, declared her physician. So these three men mirrored a problem she did not know she had and then discovered that she did. In the meeting, one of the other participants then described how his wife currently had severe rheumatoid arthritis in her right knee. So here was another mirror image. How did it happen that the wife of a person on the Zoom call could be placed directly in front of the person with the osteoarthritis so that they would be looking like a mirror, her left knee and her right knee? Well, these things are intriguing to me, and I mentioned that I had in mind before the Zoom call started that there would be coincidences among the people in the group. And why could I make that hypothesis? Well, because we begin to create a small mental atmosphere, a small psychosphere just among us, where we exchange energy and information. And those parallels are likely to continue, especially when you're talking about synchronicity. And so they happened. Well, our guest today, I don't know if she calls herself a plant whisperer, she is, and she's going to tune us into a vital, and I mean that in all senses of the word vital, aspect of our living on this planet. And we tend to talk a lot about synchronicity among and between people, as I just did, but plants are really living beings with consciousness, and they are there to communicate with us, and we can communicate with them. Cat Meyer is a beautiful plant communicator in many ways. She's been a practicing herbalist for over 30 years. She is founder and director of Sacred Planet Traditions here in Charlottesville. Her SPT's free clinic was one of the first on the East Coast and is revered as a model for other programs. She served as president of the board of United Plant Savers Board, and was the recipient of their first medicinal plant conservation award. As a former Peace Corps volunteer in Chile, coupled with her training as a physician's assistant, she is able to weave the language of biomedicine with traditional energetic systems. She is co-author of Bush Medicine of San Salvador Island, Bahamas, and author of Energetic Herbalism, a guide to sacred plant traditions, integrating elements of vitalism, Ayurveda, and Chinese medicine. This book won the Gold Medal Nautilus Award in 2022, and you can find the book on the link that will be underneath this video. Cat, it's really great having you here and having the opportunity to be able to speak with you about this subject, a subject that is very important to both of us, and especially to you. You know, as I mentioned, I talk with trees. You talk with lots of different plants. So could you please tell us a plant coincidence story?
Sure. Well, thanks, Bernie. Thanks for the invitation, and I'm really looking forward to this time with you. So, yeah, I think one of the most significant stories that I love to share is it happened quite a while ago. I was up near Sperryville, near the Shenandoah National Park. And, I really didn't have a school or a teacher for herbalism. So for me, I really say I apprenticed to the plants themselves. So that meant spending a lot of time with them, with my books and my loops and going out into the woods. And so I knew the woods very, very well, and I really wanted to go see this black cohosh in July, where I knew it would be blooming kind of this time of year. And so I'm, winding my way down, and most herbalists, we're looking at the ground, we're trying to see what's there. And, as I'm winding and turning this corner, I just felt this profound energy. All I can describe it is it's indescribable. It's just this energy. And I looked up and I saw this stunning black cohosh. They have a white plume flower, and just this emanation coming from the plant. And it was this, there's this word aesthesis that it's breathtaking, and literally my breath was taken away because I just couldn't believe that it was palpable. It was so real. And so I stood there, almost in this enchantment and entranced. And, through this exchange, I was beginning to get information. I felt this plan. It was like this download of information. I could almost taste the soil where it was growing, and I could smell the flowers. Very fetid because it pollinates flies. So, with plants, it's all about sex and who it wants to attract. And so it has this fetid aromatic smell. So all of this is happening, and I'm pretty far away from the plant. And so I'm standing there and I'm receiving this information. And when I feel that it's dissipating, I just I literally drop to my knees, and I'm weeping in awe. And I realized that, what an initiation. This was at the beginning of my training, but I had also been studying plants for a number of years. So, this, whether it's a coincidence, synchronicity, opening, being available in this moment, at this time, at this peak time of flowering for the plant, ever since then, that was that portal, in a way, of instructing me to then really, really pay attention. And as you say, with these beings, it's almost like if we walked by our friends on the street and didn't acknowledge them, that's what we're doing to these creatures, the trees, the plants. And so once this consciousness comes in that, my goodness, you don't even have to be talking. It's not like tree hugger, but there is definitely, such a profound place of engaging. And I think it's becoming almost critical at this point. We protect what we love, we protect what we know. When we begin to have deep, intimate relations with these plants, our activism, if you will, just really engages on a whole other level.
Wonderful. Wonderful, 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 wonderful. And there's so many aspects to what you just said that I want to be able to ask about. You mentioned something about plants and sex are very much related to each other, and implied that somehow there was something plant sexual in that energy that you picked up or they sent out, or however it happened. Could you describe what you think happened in that moment where plant ask you to dance?
Right. Well, I wasn't saying that. What I was saying is the plants, for plants as well as humans, sex is such a natural, organic, sensual experience, right? So I was smelling what scents the plant puts out in order to attract. So, and it's this kind of fetid, it's not this beautiful perfumey, but it was still the nature of black cohosh. When I talk about that experience, I feel it was profoundly sexual because I think ecstatic experiences are sexuality that go beyond our limitation of what we limit, whether it's an orgasm or sex or, our whole, the possibilities of our everyday having sensuality, sexuality, it's incredibly erotic, to have this plant. I felt chosen. I felt like the chosen one in a way, but how erotic is that? So I can't really say that it was the familiarity of usual ways I might experience sex, but the whole notion that these are kin. We're coming to the point now we're really understanding all life as kin, as versus objectifying nature. We're no longer saying, or we're trying to come into a relationship where we're not saying it. I don't know about genders in plants, but it's a kinship. They're not objects. And it's the same thing when we're talking about, we talk about, well, what is this plant good for? And how do I use this? Now, if I were to say, well, what's Bernie good for? And how can I use Bernie? Our friendship would not develop. So we're working, and again, this is brand new because you're still going to find herbalists and many people talk about using, but we are working with these plants. We are in relation with these plants because motherwort, black cohosh, your trees, there's no way I could ever do that. So I'm working with them as a teacher and an ally. And so really stepping in to this synchronicity of mastery, of them also being able to hold functions, to do things in our bodies that I could never do. And I am a healer and I do body work. I can't do what these plants are doing. They bring these patterns into our body, whether it's vasodilation, whether it's stimulating the liver, they have these capacities beyond any human. So really beginning to look at them in a whole other light really helps us, one, not need so many plants, and two, how do we really, really, work with the plants in our bioregion? Let's really know them. But it's really about patterns. We have patterns in our body. These plants have personalities and patterns in them. And when we take them in, they bring that and they show us, through the writing of my book, you learn many things, as you well know, because you're deeply studying it. And I had this aha moment once I realized, oh my goodness, plants teach us how to be human. Like skullcap teaches me how to relax. I can meditate, I can do yoga, I can drink a cup of skullcap tea, and I enter a state. And if I bring that into my memory, if I kind of imprint that, I'm like, whoa, this is what true relaxation feels like. I don't know if that's making sense, but it's a whole other energetic way of working with herbalism as versus symptomatic. This plant is good for this ailment. It's what are the patterns? What are the patterns of hypertension I need to change? And how will this plant therefore bring that pattern into me, whether it's cooling, relaxing, vasodilating, whatever that may be.
Oh, it makes sense to me because I have this this thing with being a doctor, which I am, and so and I've had I've been trained to use pharmaceuticals. And one of the principles that I came across, which I haven't seen written much at all, is that that even some of these pills can teach us how to be, that they are lessons in what the body can do. And so since we can, they can show us, so let's do it. It's also true with drugs like marijuana, is like it can teach you what's your capacity is, and then you can find that capacity, now that you've seen it, on your own.
Right, they're like bushwhacking pathways. And it's an interesting, as a PA, right? I have a relationship with drugs, and the word drug is Dutch for droga, which means dried plant. So we're referring to drugs, but essentially the origin of the word, and I love etymology, it's dried plant. And so cannabis is, an incredible plant as versus a drug. Unfortunately, now with kind of the marketplace and capitalism coming in, cannabis is, becoming who knows what. But, in its original state, they're those teacher plants. And I've heard some of your interviews, fabulous interviews, and bringing in psilocybin and these other plants, and why they're teacher plants is they show you the way, and then you don't have to keep repeating. It's like these people that do ayahuasca every Friday night. That's tragic to me. They're not listening to the teacher. Carl Jung, and you may know this, Carl Jung was in the era when Albert Hofmann, who discovered LSD, and Wasson, and the whole beginning of the revival of these plants, they asked Carl Jung, are you going to do these medicines, in the 50s? And he was psychedelic in himself. He didn't need anything, but he said, when my desk is cleared. And for me, that's so impactful, because I see people going back to these teacher plants. And it'd be like if I came to a class with you and I kept asking you the same question. It's rude. You'd be like, aren't you listening to me? It's like, and so these teacher plants, you don't need to keep going back, or you're not listening. And then, they're hard on the body. Our liver has to do a lot of work with some of these plants. So, there's a whole study and correct working with these plants.
Back in the old days when I was being a hippie on Haight Street, we came up with the little bit of an idea, which is really true. Less is more. Less is more. And that's so hard for people to get. I mean, the trouble with heroin, for example, is that it feels so good. So more is going to be better, and more is a lot worse when you do the heroin. It hooks you on the first hit usually, and then you're not going to get it again. It's just true of so many of the drugs that people take, that this lesson of their being teachers of us is so very important, Cat. And I'm glad you're being able to articulate that. And it's important for our audience who might be thinking about using various mind-altering drugs and others to be able to think less is more. And you're talking about why. Maybe this is, I'm not sure it's in your herbal book, but marijuana is becoming quite popular. It has been for a long time, and now even more, and unfortunately, corporately influenced. What are the patterns that plant might put into people's minds that they can then, or brains or bodies, that they can then build on without it?
Yeah, it's funny. If you would have named any other plant, I could have talked about its energetics and patterning. For me, cannabis is such an individual plant. It's used for inflammation, for pain, all the cannabinoids, endocannabinoids. In fact, next week I go up to Tammy Sweet's farm in Ithaca. She's written books. She's profound at growing, and her intention with cannabis is to keep it in the hands of herbalists. How do we process it? How do we, now we can grow our own. In Virginia, we get to grow 4 plants. We can make profound medicine, and all of her teachings in her book is just that. Let's keep it available, accessible, affordable. So the pattern of cannabis for me, I would have to say, is too far reaching because it has such profound effects very differently. You know, for some it's paranoia, for others it's bliss, for others it's sedation. So this is one where you kind of have to look at the constitution of the person. I will say what, but ask me about another plant and I can talk about that.
I will, but this one is an important one, and we'll go on to the other plants. But the key, I think you're saying, is it's so individualistic. It becomes a relationship between the cannabis and the person, him or herself. And
well, let me just say there's one thing that I think is profound about this plant. You know, endocannabinoids, you know, why people say, oh, you start with pot and it's a gateway drug and you're off to shooting or something. And the thing with the endocannabinoids is we have endogenous endocannabinoids that we produce ourselves. And in a right setting, and if this is your plant, for some people, this is just not their plant. And that's fine. That's clear. Not everybody drinks coffee. Not everybody, you know, everybody responds differently. But endocannabinoids are the chemical that creates safety. It's about home. And one of the reasons why the CBD and the CBN and all of those fractions are sedating and calming is they're filling the endocannabinoid receptors that make us feel safe. And so that's so interesting when you see certain people, there's paranoia, and that's a whole other conversation. But it's a very, very complex plant and one to totally be respected, of course. And thank goodness, you know, there's an availability and there is safety around a plant that has a tremendous amount to help us feel that way.
Well, I guess I'm going to ask one more question because there's a difference.
That's totally fine. Yeah.
There's a difference between sativa and indica usually in plants. In San Francisco back then, we only had Columbia Red and Panama Red, which were we didn't know sativa, which is highly stimulating, more likely to get paranoid and energized with sativa than with indica. And so people need to know there's some difference between the two, although they're combined now in 25-75% one or the other. But how does sativa differ in your view from indica?
I think pretty much as you just stated, you know, one is more visual, one is more calming and one is more stimulating. You know, it can be that simple. But one thing I do want to say is there is now such a specificity to the culture and hybrid that it's almost like psilocybin. They're almost breeding and interbreeding to making potent medicine. And so that could be good. It all depends on the person that's using it. So there's all kinds of chemistry, all kinds of profiles. You know, you go into a state where it's legal and you read the ingredients list and you really need a doctorate in some ways. You know, is this up? Is this down? But it's because it is such a moving target these days. For me, it's in some ways harder, but it's like you said, the sativa feels more sedating and not so psychoactive.
Indica is more sedating, and and they're doing the same thing with psilocybin, of which there are burgeoning numbers.
Oh, right. It's right. I got it reversed. Thank you.
Burgeoning numbers of psilocybin versions. There's just lots of them now, and it's the same thing. And I think it's important to bring people to that realization of the spectrum of both, and all of them are getting more potent. But let's come back to energetic herbalism in the way that you experience it and live it. Really, is that that you have a relationship with these plants, and that first encounter is such a paradigmatic example of what I'm so interested in having people learn, is that that plant attracted you somehow, and it wasn't just the plant doing it. There was something about you that was planted in you to be able to like respond to that plant. And that plant began to tell you, as other plants have, what they need from you and what I guess they can do for you too. I guess it's a two-way street. Could you tell us about some of your experiences communicating with plants?
Yeah. So for me, it's about relationship, in the sense that I feel that that cohosh had that response for me because I had been visiting it over and over. And, I always say to people, look, you're really looking for the ideal piece of land. Well, a piece of land is looking for the ideal steward. And we have this anthropocentric view of ourself and the relation.
Oh, so important. So please beat that drum because that's so important.
Yeah. So, we think it's all about us and what can I get from it? But the interesting thing is, nature is absolutely waiting for us. And I meant it. It's like if you walked by friends down the street and did not acknowledge them. And there's so much, even in our yards. I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my trees and my stewardia and my beautiful trees. One of the reasons why my garden flourishes is we acknowledge them. We sing a lot. Plants love song. That's
Oh,
why the Skiero, they have the songs, because the song is that resonance, is that synchronicity. That song moves into that vibration, and that's a collective presence. And so, I was at a friend's labor and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were outside and it was definitely the dead still of night. And she was out there laboring, and then all of a sudden I heard the forest literally wake up. And it wasn't that, transitional time of 3-4 when the birds start waking in that magnificent early morning. This was dead of night. And in that moment, Bernie, I realized the forest misses us tremendously. It used to hear us die. It used to hear us make love. It used to hear us birth. We were out there. Our sounds, our acknowledgement, we were part of that. We were part of that whole matrix, if you will. And so now we've really separated ourselves, we protected ourselves. And so it's also this missing, this enchantment that nature misses us. And, a Native American I interviewed for the book, he said, Americans or Westerners think that, oh, let's take humans out of a wilderness and we'll preserve the wilderness. And he said, what happens is it becomes lonely. We are such a keystone species. We're so important. And also we're part of that. We're not separate. And so how are we, to be part of this and not to have such a destructive role in it? And we destroy because we don't consider them. Oh, they're just trees. Oh, it's just a oak. It's just a whatever. And, obviously we can go on. I'm not going to go on a rant of development. And also, even in our backyards, we have profound impact on the environment. It's overwhelming. We've got the smoke from Canada right now. We have the extreme temperatures rising. And so even within our backyard, we know that these trees, Susan Simard, so many brilliant, the mycelia, Paul Stamens, they're communicating, they're connecting. So if I go into my backyard and I'm really honoring my walnuts, my oaks, my catalpa in the front, that's a way of really addressing, the World Wide Web underneath. And so I'm not a new age person. In my clinical training, I'm really pretty rigorous. I don't think it's all good. I think it all is. It all is. And it is what we're making it. So where our attention is, so walking around, just beginning to look at these trees. And so back to the question of the communication, for me, it's getting to know them. Well, who are you? Whether it's a black-eyed Susan, whether it's chickweed, whether it's plantain, and it's spending time with them. So it's not as though I'm saying, oh, how are you serving me? It's who are you first? What are you about? Where do you like to grow? What do you need? And it's through observation. It can be through journey work, sitting down. You can either use drums, you can do a meditation. It's observing. It's like Goethe, brilliant German, everything man, Renaissance man. He got into the phenomenon itself, and that's how he studied plants, and it was rigorous. And so, but it's simply observing. And then, there's all different ways of listening to a plant and understanding a plant. And I think first and foremost, they want us to relate. They want us to realize they have value. There's a kinship. We're just so much more than carbon. I mean, we kind of look at them as a carbon bank, right? As versus, oh my God, these beech trees, look at the stories these beech trees hold. And whether we hear those exact stories articulated, we can get an energetic sense of history, just what that is. We don't need the details. And so it's a huge exchange, a very, very important exchange. And I had a teacher, Elliot Cowan, who teaches, he's passed away this year actually, but plant spirit medicine. And he taught journey work, and he worked with a Huichol shaman in 5 Element. He's an acupuncturist, and he was brilliant. And, he talks about, because we would have these fights. This is like 20 years ago. I'm like, oh, and theogenics, and we need these mind altering plants. And he was like, no, all of these plants have that capability. And over 20 years, Bernie, I have come to see when certain things are, created in ceremony and sacred fires. I have had an entheogenic experience with black cohosh from my teacher who's Choctaw. I mean, it was the same psychedelia. It was that hyperspace, and it was 2 drops of black cohosh. Now, she presented it and held it in sacred ceremony. But all of these plants have abilities that we are just beginning to tap into. Chickweed, I can't tell you the miracle healing stories of chickweed. And if anybody has a garden, you've got chickweed because it loves nourished soil. But so for me, it's relationship. And what does chickweed? So in my journey with chickweed over a period of time, it said to me, it's for children who don't laugh enough. Now, in my book, I'm not going to put that because that's my personal story with it. That's how I use it. I don't feel that qualified to speak for chickweed. You know what I'm saying? It's like I see a lot of flower essence people like sit with the essence and they're like, oh, this is for blah, blah, blah. Well, it takes humility, and it takes a lot of time to come up. It's like the Bach flower remedies. Dr. Bach sat for years and years and years coming up with the emotional vibration that his flower remedies work with people. So it's your relationship with them, and then how do you use them? We all have flowers that we absolutely love. And they may not be medicines, but they're a medicine for us. We can't get enough irises or whatever it is. For me, it's black-eyed Susans. There's just something about that plant that just gives me joy. It just, it has medicine for me. So the communication is a relationship.
For me, I got two coleus plants sitting in as like guardians of my porch. And so
Oh,
I see them when I go out, I see them when I eat out there, and I admire how beautiful they are and how different they are. One's more flowery and the other one's more masculine. And I say, boy, you are really different. And then sometimes they suddenly grow up a lot. I said, what happened here? I mean, you didn't get all that rain. How come you're so much bigger? Well, you're telling me they're so much bigger because their friends out there in the lawn got a lot of grass, so they went up there with them. Is what a lot of rain, so they went up there with them. So
mm,
I sometimes have held the two had leaves on one or the other and let them communicate through me, which they seem to like to be able to do. What what the most important thing of the many important things you've said, Kat, um, at least to me, is the forest needs us. And I hadn't really thought of that when I visit the trees. And the trees like me to sing to them. And I
mm,
haven't heard anybody tell me that plants like us to sing to them. And they have a particular set of repertoires of mind that they like. And the ones that they like one that have to do with mountains
mm,
and forests. They like those. And I do other ones too for them, and sometimes they seem to ask me for one, like pick from my playlist for what you would like to be able to hear. Like one of their favorites is "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." I mean, that's a beautiful, beautiful song in many ways, and so it's their experience with birds and sky and clouds that I felt a longing for them when you said they need me too. And when I hit the forest at Mint Springs, there's some release that seems to happen, and I'm able to see it's they're greeting me, which is what I feel it is sometimes. I thought
mm,
you might be interested to know that a couple of times the forest, speaking to me, said, "Don't come back here for 6 weeks." They kicked
mm,
me out of there.
mm.
And the first time I felt like Adam and Eve being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, I was crying because I couldn't go there. And I asked them later what happened, and they said, "You think too much. You have too many thoughts going on in you, and you kind of take too much of our energy, and you need to like take care of that before you come back." So that along with the second time is they wanted me to appreciate how beautiful they are because I do too much thinking in there. So
Hmm.
now I'm able to see not how beautiful they are, only like the leaves on the ground and the patterns they show in the fall are so pretty. And the funny ways trees organize themselves, they look like they're
Yeah.
cartoon characters and you're laughing at them of what they're doing, but they need to be seen. They need us too. And you've made that point so beautifully, Kat, that they're used to having humans running around in there. One time I was in there and sitting down, and a bunch of ants were crawling all over me, and it was as if the fingers of the forest were checking me out. The ants as
Mm, yeah.
the tips of their fingers. So this is thanks for alerting me to this and telling our audience go out in the forest. They need you too. I mean, it's a wonderful interchange, and then be able to exchange information, energy, feeling. When I go in front of these trees, sometimes I end up bowing down. I can't help it. I just bow down to them, the energy, and I dance with these three trees. And these are all things that you're familiar with without my having. Well, I found them myself, and that's why it's so nice talking with you to be able to tell you what my experience out there is. So I'm not gonna ask you any questions. You can respond to what I just said or go on to something else.
Well, it's so beautiful that you're responsive enough to move from the energy of the trees I mean, we look at traditional peoples and tribal peoples and the dances and the music and that's in response to their environment. Yes, it's music. Yes, you look at Native American hoop dances, what is more magnificent, but the dancing and the response and the movement and kind of the thundering, the earth is drum, whatever that sound is. And, I can't pretend that I'm in this, blissful state 24/7. But, when I am conscious and I get out of my car and I'm coming into the house, it is this, oh, wow, we forget. It's just like landscape. It's like, oh, I got to weed that. And oh, here comes this volunteer tree. We look at it, myself included, as work to do is versus this celebration, this incredible celebration. Bernie, my teacher, native teacher, said, every single property, whether it's a rental, I have it's a botanical sanctuary downtown Charlottesville, but it's a small lot. Every single stewarded area has a mother tree. And that mother tree is tending. And so I always tell students and people, go find the mother tree and just walk around. And it doesn't matter if you're wrong, but for the most part, everybody's like, oh, that's the mother tree. And it doesn't always have to be the oldest. It generally is the oldest. But, when you're talking about dancing with your trees, it's like, are you bringing gifts? Are you honoring them? Whenever we harvest medicine, we bring gifts. It's a reciprocal action. I'm taking, I'm harvesting, I'm taking this plant. What am I leaving? What am I giving? And so there's this Costa Rican teacher that taught me, from the age of 4 till 12, he studied with his grandfather, and he had to learn the song of every plant until he couldn't harvest until he learned the song. Now, the song is a note or 2 notes. It's not words. Plants don't speak in words, like they're not human. So he had to learn the song, but when he learned the song, when he harvested, he would sing that song, and that spirit came into the medicine. Now I can harvest, mullein, and I get great, great medicine. But if I learned the song, which I don't know, of mullein, imagine all that time, that spirit coming into that plant. That's how that black cohosh turned entheogenic. My teachers knew the sacred song of that cohosh, and that wild native plant became an ancestor journey. That's how they used it. So the plant world is, so multidimensional, so psychedelic without the psychedelics, just being out there as you're experiencing in Mint Spring or, your yard, whatever that is. So, that song of the plant and, maybe instead of thinking, they're wanting you to walk through humming or singing or just staying in a mantra, keeping that mantra, staying as present as you can. It's just those sounds that are really loved.
Yeah. I hear words from plants and forests. How does that happen?
So we need to, like, I'll get words as well. And there's a differentiation when I'm teaching plant spirit medicine and journeying. I'm trying to help the person differentiate what's projection. What do I want this plant? What do I need this plant to say? And it's, how are we a clear slate? How do we work with that and arrive as though if I had heard many things about you and then I met you, I'd come with preconceived notions.
Yeah.
I just met you on the street and I'm like, oh, it's Bernie, and what a great guy, and he's so friendly and warm. And, it's kind of the same thing with the plant. We have to hear words because that's how we register. That's the data that comes in. a lot of times there's also feelings and senses
Yeah.
and emotion.
Yeah.
It's the emotive body. And my teacher in this, Stephen Buhner, was saying, he kept saying, what does this make you feel? What does it make you feel? And people say, oh, confused, elated. He goes, no, feel sad, mad, glad, or scared. You know, he super broke it down. And that helps us realize what are our emotions in that way. So yes, of course, you know, when I journal, I'll be like, you know, chickweed, how would I hear that used for children who don't laugh too much? I'm not certain how that transmission goes because they don't speak English, right? Like, think about it. How could a plant speak? But they do. But there's this generosity of creator. You know, I just think the whole thing is mind blowing. The whole thing is absolutely mind blowing that you can sit down and learn from these plants. And is there, you know, this generation of data that arrives into our, you know, language speaking selves? I mean, do birds communicate with the plants through song? Of course, you know, insects through their sound, you know, so it's intra-species communication. You know, it arrives and lands on us in the way that we can best
Hear it.
hear it.
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Or comprehend it. Comprehend it. It comes to us in the way we can best comprehend it. And I think that's part of what I was thinking about, how it comes to words. I translate something from the trees
Exactly.
into
Absolutely.
what I can get, but there is a communication. And I've had to be able to do what you said is how much is it projection and how much is it from the trees? And we've played around with that. They've challenged me a couple of times where I said, you think this, you think this is true, or do you think you're talking to us? And the other thing was not going to be true. So I was talking to them. But then another time I had a thought come like into this that said, get that redhead here. And it was very clear. They wanted an artist that I knew to come up to them and appreciate how beautiful they are because she could see it and I couldn't. And they were trying to get somebody to do what I could do. So I could hear the words, but among the emotions that you mentioned, I know you will include love because I love the trees and they love me. And when I go up there with them and I form a rhombus with the three of them, we're on the fourth corner of it, that I am at home. I am feeling that I'm where where I'd like to be, that I'm part of them and they're part of me. And I guess I am completing something for them as well as for me. And just standing there with them is a profoundly beautiful experience.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I think, Bernie, that's why I meant that generosity of creation. It's love. You know, it's the unlimited possibilities. It's everything. It's the fact that, you know, we were speaking earlier that, you know, we're made of these plants. That's love. You know, when we talk about, you know, the native traditions say plants are our ancestors. You know, this isn't a nice creation myth. This is reality. This is, you know, we're made of stardust. The planet is made of stardust. The carbon, the nitrogen, the limestone of these mountains, that's our bones. That's our tissues. That's our nervous system. Like, so when we eat plant food, when we drink plant tea, there's this immediate resonance. And there's this infinite, you know, this familiarity of, even if we don't like the taste, even, you know, we like sweet and salty. Americans' taste spectrum is really limited. But, you know, the sweet of minerals, the sweet of earth, you know, there's a whole like sommelier of the herb world possibility there. But we can take a supplement, but our body has to break it down in the liver and, okay, here's this. But when we take that hawthorn leaf tea, there's this immediacy of reception because it's familiar, because we are of the plants, are the genesis, I'm not going to say rib of Adam. I'm not, that's not my origin tale, but the soil, we're out of the soil. So it's just so phenomenal. And so when we're trying to really feel that communion, it's hard to feel all one. But when we begin to realize that, these leaves, the chlorophyll, and I'm sure you know this, the chlorophyll of plants is identical to our heme ring, except we have iron in the middle and plants have magnesium. And magnesium, like 60% of Americans now are deficient in magnesium. Huge, huge need. So, eating your leafy greens, there's a whole lot to that, but that's blood. The blood of the plants nourishes our blood, cleanses our blood. It's like creator, whoever that may be for you, that's love. That is such a supreme act of giving us all of our medicines, all of our food. And of course, there's a place for allopathy. Of course, there's a place, because that's part of us too. That's our nature. These are the elements as well, but it's just how much are we working with?
No wonder I like so much to put leafy greens, especially during the summer, in my smoothies. Just like to stuff them in there. And that hemoglobin chlorophyll thing. Chlorophyll is a miracle in itself. And I try to find out, hey, evolutionary biologists, where did that chlorophyll come from? And yeah, it was in these microorganisms that were converting sunlight into some energy. But how did it get into those little cells that then we could build on it? It converts sunlight into being able to breathe, to be able to walk around. It gives us our energy. And it's without chlorophyll, we wouldn't be able to be walking around here. And that's what the plants give us. And then eating it directly is a good thing for your blood. It resonates because it's the same thing. Iron versus magnesium is the biggest difference. Well, those are wonderful insights. For me, really, hearing you talking about all this. And I wonder if you could, in our closing time here, we have about 5 or 10 minutes left, what you might want to say to our audience about their relationship to plants and how they might nurture their connection with plants. And you said a lot of it about, hey, I recognize you. It's not just, hey, what's happening? It's like whatever you do. And I do that with my coleus. I'm doing that more with the trees in the yard because they're starting to talk with me. There's a bunch of them. And I sit there in the middle, like the middle of the vibrational thing where they're coming down at me. And the mother tree, find the mother tree. It's the oak tree for me in the back. It's a big baby and it covers some of the house. And it's a strong thing. And they're connected with each other. So you've made those suggestions to people. Find the mother tree, recognize that the plants want to interact with you. They need you. They want to communicate with you and do it by feeling or however else you might be able to do it. And some plants are just what you are because we evolved from them.
Right.
And
right.
they feed what we've got in us, the limestone as our bones, for example, and the chlorophyll as like our hemoglobin. So these are wonderful lessons, Cat. I see why you're so popular out there on the talk circuit. You got some.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You got some great things. Now I just need to make a couple of songs to create an album.
Well, we sing a lot. We're always singing. Our neighbors love it. And somebody actually a whole development kind of came in the backyard, and this is a long time ago, and they came to me and they said, oh, you must be a landscape designer, will you design our gardens? And it's just wild and weedy and big but beautiful and absolutely verdant. And I know it's because we're admiring it. Imagine we have a class and we've got 20 people out there, and we're talking about the elderberry, and we're singing her praises. The elderflower does this, the elderberry does this, and everybody's oohing and ahhing, and of course she's gonna just look radiant. So, even if the talking or the communicating is more than you want to get into at this point, just love them up. Just really, really admire. They did this amazing study a long time ago. Olga Worrell, I don't know if anybody remembers her. She was famous in the energetic healing world. And so they went down to Duke and they had these rhododendrons and they wired them up. And so Olga was doing, thinking about different things, and they were measuring the shift and change. They couldn't do growth. It wasn't, and it was a short span of time, but they were realizing the different activity. So then they hooked this one up, and this fella went in the room and he yanked one of the rhododendrons up. It sounds horrible, and it was horrible. The thing is, the same fellow walked back in, didn't touch a thing. The other rhododendron went off its chart. I don't know if plants feel sad, feel angry. That's an anthropocentric projection. They vibe. They feel, they can sense. How are they sensing? I don't know if that rhododendron was frightened. I think that's too much of a projection. We will never, ever know if there's an emotion there. But it reacted, it responded, it was in danger. And it had this whole electrical output. So it's like being mindful. So if we're worried about the boreal forest, everybody's worried about the Amazon. What's happening in Canada? The boreal forest is so much more vital to our climate than the Amazon, and nobody ever pays attention to it. And now it's, everybody's kind of complaining about it, and it's bad for business. And people are like, really? Like, don't you understand? Like, this forest is more than the Amazon as far as. So anyway, so love up. If the first thing to do is just start in your yard and be like, wow, thank you, arborvitae. Thank you. Just the admiration, the appreciation, that engagement. And you're going to be really surprised at the synchronicity that happens. Medicines show up in people's yard, and they may not even know what a mullein is. And the child has asthma, the child has earaches, and lo and behold, that medicine is right there. So the synchronicity of where plants show up, and you don't even have to be in relationship with them. I see this over and over and over again. So I think I would just say start simple and just appreciate them. And the last thing I'll say is with the grandmother tree, just imagine those images in Africa or India where there's altars underneath these beautiful trees. So even if you're laying shells, even if you're laying rocks, you're taking gifts. It's the gifting that is very important.
Is mulching gifting?
Well, as long as you don't mulch right up and you allow water to come through and
yeah
come through. If the intention when you're mulching is I love you, I'm going to protect you, that's fine. If it's just to make it look good, you might want to go put a few gems, put a few, fairies love sparkly things. Like the whole elemental world loves sparkly things. So when I was traveling in Ireland and we were at the sacred sites, they were hanging what we might think is riffraff or tinsel. And I mean, these woodlands in Wells were just like, oh my God, it was palpable. So
they like sparkly things. They like sparkly things. Well, I've got a lot of ground ivy in my where the grass is. There's a more formal name for it, and it's called an invasive species. And I've tried to have a relationship with them where they don't come up to where some of my bushes are underneath, but just stay in the yard, and I just stay there. And I've got a little the way the guy cuts the thing, keeps them away from. I have a little wall that keeps them away from the mulched area, and it's a beautiful lawn where there wasn't much grass growing in the way and now in the spring it flowers because they flower. So what is this ground ivy trying to tell me, you think?
Well, I would ask the ground ivy. It's your relationship. Ground ivy is a powerful medicine. We use it all the time for sinuses, for clearing sinuses, and kind of a natural antihistamine. Golden seal herb, which a lot of people are familiar with, is endangered. And so we use ground ivy oftentimes because it's clearing and cooling and drying. But good luck, because it's a creeper. It spreads by running.
Yeah.
It was Gilor the ground. They used it a lot for brewing. Early brewers would use it. But the other thing is it chelates heavy metal out of the environment. So wherever you harvest, and I don't think where you live is a heavy metal industry, but if anybody is harvesting ground ivy, because it is a good medicine, you just want to make sure that it's a chelator. So you don't want to pull it.
You want to, yeah, you got to be careful with it. And the message there is that, and we're going to end just about now, Cat. The message there is they're all friendly out there, those plants, even poison ivy, I guess.
They're all who they are. Like, I don't, friendly is.
Oh, okay, they're all who they are.
Well, they are who they are, and poison ivy is an earth protector, and poison ivy, and there's poison hemlock out there, and that's fatal. Like, and that's in along our roads, and it looks a lot like elder. It looks a lot like yarrow, and what the poison hemlock is the only thing in our bioregion that'll really take you out. Poison is in the dose. Right? It's broccoli can be too toxic. But are all humans friendly?
Let me guess. So let me guess about that.
We're all made of love, and plants are all made of love, and we all come forward. We may not like the thorns on that rambling rose, but evolutionarily, that thorn serves that plant. So the poison serves that plant, and small doses of belladonna in micro doses serve us. And so, again, it's all in the dose, and it's all in the relationship. And it's also the point of the relationship within the plant itself. What is it using that constituent for?
Cat, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation with you.
I know, you're so fun, Bernie, and your relationships. I
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I do think it's because the appreciation is truly going both ways now. It's like,
absolutely.
It's a wonderful thing, and maybe it's a way of talking about I'm a plant, and she's showing you how to relate to a plant. That's me, and the plant is responding very well. So it's an interactive thing, and we got to keep people aware that plants, I'll put it in these terms, it's not right. Plants are people too. It's anthropomorphic to say it that way, but it's beginning to say that there's something conscious, experiential, emotional, however we define that for a plant, with plants. And we need them and they need us. And let's use this, people listening to this, as a way of getting out there and knowing that you can relate to plants in ways that maybe you haven't thought about.
Yeah, I loved how you started referring to them as sentient beings.
I know it, and you know it even better, that they're sentient beings. Thank you very much, Cat Meyer, for being with us, and I'll see you around.
I hope so. All right. Thank you.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.